Okay, occasionally I'm going to produce a video which is going to bring everybody back to basics, and this is one such video. The basics of this scenario is that a crime has taken place. I can go through all the different scenarios that took place in Abu Dhabi, expose each individual element, and there will be people that will try to contest each of those elements. That is their nature. They will want to take each one in isolation, and there are at least 40 elements, and they will want to go, oh, well, that's not that. Oh, well, that's not that, because that is their desire. They want to argue validity for what took place because they like what took place. And so they will take each element in isolation and say, well, there could be an explanation for that. But is there an explanation for all 40 when you put them in sequence? You have to come up with 40 different explanations, and you have to accept all of those 40 different explanations as being just randomly occurring. That's a bit strange. That doesn't happen by chance. It can only happen by design. But these individuals that will seek to argue will want to argue that because their corrupt desires are as such that that is what they want. The simplicity of it is a crime took place and it constitutes a fraud. Rewind. At the end of Abu Dhabi, what emerged after the event through the media was this notion of all teams agreed that they would prefer to have a racing finish rather than that race end behind the safety car. That got presented to the world as if it was normal and as if it was an acceptable way of concluding that race. Now, if the rules of the sport are not broken, then there's no problem with having that common desire. But you cannot manufacture that desire. As soon as you start manufacturing that desire, you are manipulating an outcome of a sporting event, and that is a fraud, that is a crime. This isn't Sunday League football. If it's a Sunday League football match and two teams fix an outcome between them, the police aren't going to get involved. You would expect, if it is brought to the attention of the administrators of the league administrators will punish the two teams that are offending. This is a global sport. A global sport sold to a global audience of in excess of 108 million people. A sport which people bet on. Vast sums of money often. A sport in which millions is invested in by multiple parties, multiple sponsors and advertisers, and people invest a lot of time, emotion, and money in. If you go manipulating professional sport, that is a crime. That constitutes fraud. There is a benefit to those people that have manipulated it. There is beneficiaries of fraud, financial benefits. The beneficiaries are those who stand to gain through having an increased size of audience. Those will be Liberty Media, whose value of their business for being the commercial rights holder to Formula One increased by $4.8 billion over the course of the 2021 season. Those beneficiaries will be all of the Formula One teams who saw the average value of their team increase from around about $500 million in around about 2019 to about $1.9 billion by the end of 2021. Those values are increased because the size of the audience has increased. Therefore, the marketability of the sport is greater and the money associated with that is much greater. They perpetrated a fraud to try to grow an audience. So there can be an intention saying, ideally, we would like this race to end as a race and not behind the safety car, because by ending behind the safety car, that may turn off some of the fans. Okay, that might be a statement of truth. That might be your preference, should circumstances allow. But if circumstances do not allow, in accordance with the rules of the sport, then that race needs to end how it needs to end in accordance with the rules of the sport. As soon as you start breaking those rules, you are manipulating a sport, and that is exactly what has been done. And what media has ever presented that? What journalist has ever presented that? Quite a simple task. Quite a simple thing to do to expose that there has been manipulation of a sport through breaking the rules of the sport, and every journalist has just sought to present validation for it rather than expose simple facts. People that are employed on good salaries, the likes of Andrew Benson at the BBC, has never exposed simple facts of the situation, and that manipulation constitutes a fraud. It is as simple as that. Now, there will be people that will not be able to accept that and will seek to argue it. This channel is not about asking you your opinion. It is not me saying, this is what I think. What do you think in the comment section? Because this isn't a case of, this is my opinion, what's yours? This is a fact. This isn't an exchange of opinions. This is a fact. So if you don't understand that this is a fact, and if you think that you have a different version which is not the same as this, you are wrong. And I'm not interested in what you have to say. You are simply wrong if you do not understand that this is a fraud. You can do your research, but many of you won't. You can look online and Google things such as, what is sports manipulation? Can you manipulate events in sport? Read, learn. Rather than jump up in the comment section, read and learn. And I will take you through this document, which I will put a link to in the description. And it's the Convention on Manipulation of Sport Competition, and this was produced in 2020. And I'm going to take you through a few of the sections on. So there's a working group. Now what they do, they go through examples that they can think of which will highlight the scenarios that can take place, what about those scenarios constitutes manipulation, and therefore the course of action that and how it should be deemed and treated. They don't cover every scenario because you don't necessarily dream up every way which manipulation can take place. But manipulation has taken place, and what it did, it changed the outcome of that event by breaking the rules of the sport. Now if I scroll down to section 3, there's a table here that gives you the types of manipulation, and it's modification that is non-compliant with criminal law or sporting rules. It is a criminal offence, and people need to realise that it's a criminal offence. You come down here, types of sport manipulation, and it will go through them. Where are we? Come in then. Definitions of manipulations of sports competition. Where are we? The McCollin Convention defines the manipulation of sport competition as an intentional arrangement, act or omission aimed at improper alteration of the result of the course of a sports competition in order to remove all or part of the unpredictable nature of the aforementioned sports competition with a view to obtaining an undue advantage for oneself or for others. So, sport is of an unpredictable nature. This notion of, oh, we must have a racing finish. Well, you can't predict that. You cannot predict that. You cannot make that happen if the circumstances do not allow. So just creating that is a manipulation. If you don't understand that, go and learn. Because the children that are making comments out of naivety, out of what you have been conditioned to believe, out of listening to the media, being told that, oh, yeah, the teams have all agreed by that. That all the teams agreed that it should be a racing finish. And you hear that information and you just parrot it. You repeat it. Yeah, the teams agreed. So it's all okay. The teams agreed. Right. You are mindless. You are brainless because you are parroting back something that you have been told that you do not understand. They have conditioned you into thinking that that is not a crime, when it is a crime. And if you don't understand that it's a crime, I suggest you go and educate yourself, because you won't take my word for it. Instead, you'll prefer to jump up in the comment section and point the finger and go, ha ha, you don't know what you're talking about, ha ha, you're just a fanboy. No, I'm just highlighting a crime. I'm highlighting a crime which is being failed to be investigated. And why is that? Who is influencing those agencies which are tasked for investigating crime? How deep does corruption in this world actually go? That is a problem. Some people are waking up to this. Some people are waking up to the interests of the extremely wealthy being allowed to be perpetrated without consequence. It seems that money, wealth, can afford you a different set of rules in life. Rules that apply to you and me, to every one of us, but don't seem to apply to them because they've got enough money to be able to afford to pay these agencies or whoever's making the decisions to not investigate and punish the crimes that they are perpetrating. There's a problem, a huge problem. So, take yourself and have a look through this document. The manipulation of sports competition involves an intentional arrangement, act or omission. An intentional arrangement. All teams agreed they would prefer a racing finish. That's an intention. An intention agreed by all teams, stakeholders of that sport, because they were benefiting from the increased wealth of the sport. These arrangements, acts of omission, aim, successfully or unsuccessfully, to improperly alter the result or the course of a sports competition. The course of that sports competition was that that event had to end behind the safety car. That would have produced a certain result. That course was altered, that result was then altered, and actually, prior to the course being altered, it was easy to predict what outcome would be altered. That constitutes fixing. The alteration of the course of the event occurs in order to remove all or part of the unpredictable nature of the aforementioned sports competition. And that is what it is. These arrangements, acts or omissions occur with a view, once again, successfully or unsuccessfully, to obtaining an undue advantage for oneself or for others. That is exactly what Red Bull used that situation for. The notion of Red Bull playing some clever cards. The notion that this agreement meant that this race would not end behind the safety car. Red Bull took advantage of that situation and perpetrated their manipulation of that event. That can be demonstrated. People will say, oh, it wasn't that. You are arguing for a corrupt cause because that is what you like. Doesn't mean you are right. When everything else demonstrates and can be categorically proven, you are wrong. The definition of sports competition manipulation includes the intention of the manipulation, even if that intention is unsuccessful and fails to obtain the undue advantages sought. The undue advantage always has a financial dimension, either directly or as a consequence of the sports competition manipulation. The exploitation of betting markets is just one of many ways of obtaining an undue financial advantage. So, I will at some stage go into more depth about this. I wanted to keep this one fairly short. What is overlooked is the fact that Abu Dhabi 2021 was a crime. It was a fraud. It was sports manipulation, which is illegal. The governing body of the sport broke the rules of the sport to manufacture an ending which is not allowed within the rules of the sport. They then claimed justification for doing so. You are not allowed to do that. That is a crime. It constitutes fraud. People do not understand that. They will argue for desires. This is not opinion based, this is a matter of fact. A crime took place, the FIA perpetrated it, but every stakeholder in that sport was complicit with it. All teams were complicit with that. All sponsors were complicit with that. None of them have raised any objections to what took place. The commercial rights holder of the sport, the major beneficiary, they will have orchestrated it. Their media that they contract conditioned you, the viewer, to believe that that was possible and that it doesn't constitute a crime, that this agreement overrides rules of sport. No such agreement overrides rules of sport. It constitutes manipulation, which is a crime. It is a fraud, and people will go to prison for fraud. They list examples. And the further you go, they're reported on the BBC, where they actually, I'll get there eventually, the BBC will give examples of who's been sent to prison for perpetrating fraud through trying to manipulate sport. It is further down. I'll probably do that in a future video to demonstrate, but I'll leave the link to this one in the description so that you can have a read at your own leisure. But there are often financial reasons, which there clearly was. So there you go, there's an example there. The Italian football example. There's one which is English football. There you go, the BBC. That one's actually Olympics. And there's others where there's people match fixing in. There we go, that one. Delroy Facey jailed after match fixing trial. It is a fraud. The perpetrators need to face prison time, jail sentences for perpetrating a global fraud. So, I will get back into exposing the individual details, and I will go through each of these elements, and I will continue to get people that will try to argue against it. But the fundamental aspect of this is, Abu Dhabi 2021 was a crime. You don't move on from a crime. You ensure that that crime is properly dealt with and the perpetrators of that crime receive punishment for their actions, for their criminal activity. If you don't understand, leave it to the adults. Leave it to those people who do understand, because your opinions are irrelevant. Anyway, till the next time.